Hey everybody, it's Joric. Welcome back. Hope you're doing great wherever you are in the world. This is a moving to Portugal or moving around Portugal video for those of you that are looking for an apartment or looking for a place to rent. 90 to 95% of people, probably higher than that, rent first and then look for a place to buy. There are more people that are interested in maybe purchasing a property these days in Portugal. But the overwhelming majority of you that watch this channel and watch all the other channels are going to be renting or are renting currently. And I wanted to show you something. The Portugal News and Portugal Resident are two newspapers that I don't have a lot of faith in because the publications are not that great and the articles are not that robust, but that's neither here nor there. Once in a while, they have a good article that's worth talking about. And this one was interesting, caught my eye. 53,000 new apartments on hold. And as you know, there's a supply and demand issue here. There are about 750,000 empty or vacant or could be used properties throughout Portugal, and that's by Portugal's metrics, that are available that either are in family hands that could be rented or sold, or they need to be renovated completely and redone. So aside from that, new projects, there's 53,000 here that have been on hold, and some of them go back to 2019, 2018. There are a few projects. I mentioned where we live. We live in kind of the Estrela Lapa area of Lisbon, which is near the city center. And as we're walking down to, let's say, the Chiado area or the Cais de Sod area, there are a handful of new projects. So I'm not talking about renovation of buildings, brand new buildings. And some of those started during the pandemic. Some of them started before the pandemic, and there's virtually no construction going on at the moment. And I've talked to a couple of the managers of those projects because I look at so many properties. I'm always looking to see what's new, what's old, what's different. And they said, well, part of the issue, about 10% of the issue is labor. They said many Portuguese skilled labor work in other countries because they can make more money. So often Portuguese new projects or whoever is doing the new project in Portugal has to rely on workers from other countries, and that isn't always easy, and there isn't always an oversupply of them or much of a supply at all of that skilled labor that can do construction work. But 90% of the time when I asked, it's bureaucracy, it's the government, it's the one person that has a building in central, a brand new building that they're working on in central Lisbon, said that, and he's Portuguese. He said it's like the government hates us. We have issues with high rents. We have a building that can have, I think it's 24 apartments that can help that. They're not going to be $1 million properties. They're going to be more middle-ranged properties. And they've been sitting on their hands for about 2.5 years where they haven't been able to get things through permitting. Now, he had said that he could play the game, and he said, I could write a check and I could pay off some people to get things going again, but he just chooses not to do that. He said he's already financially in the hole or behind the 8 ball on this project because it should have come online about a year ago. So as you're looking at this is something that can be frustrating because when you're trying to find a place, it's hard enough to find a place and for someone that'll give you a 1-year contract or even longer. There aren't a lot of properties out there, and sometimes you may be finicky about what you're looking for, or the landlord's very finicky about who they want in the property. But I just wanted to let you know there's a lot of property that will be coming online once the permitting gets done so they can actually finish building these places. But that may not come for a few years. But I also wanted to show you along that. So that's the Debbie Downer portion of the thing. And then the other side of that is, along with all this new stuff, is that there was another article which I thought was worth looking at and reading, is that Idealista did a publication, they did a survey where there was more property available for rent. So as much as I just talked out of one side of my mouth going, there's still a supply and demand issue, and there still is in Portugal. There's a lot of new property that's just waiting to go online that if they could just get through all the government baloney they can get those done and sold. So it helps with supply and demand. But it seems like there are more people putting their property up for rent. I can tell you in our neighborhood, and I apologize because I keep talking about our neighborhood, but it's a transitional neighborhood. It's older population, mostly Portuguese, but there are some immigrants, more immigrants like us moving in. And we go from seeing Vendi signs, for sale signs, that have been up. Some places on our street have been up since 2018 when we were looking at the property we're in. And they're still for sale, and they're still for the same amount, and they're never going to get sold for that. But that's a sidebar. But what we are seeing is more places for rent. And when I'm looking at Idealistia and looking in our particular area, things were for sale, it seems like there's a handful more families that own the property or whoever owns the property that are looking to get some rental income in. So there's some glimmer of hope in Porto, in Lisbon, and other areas where you might see more availability when you're looking for property. So what that means is if you want certain types of property, more will become available. So T1s, T2s, T3s, especially for families, maybe some bigger properties. The one thing that we're not seeing, whether we're waiting for new builds to come online, whether their Idealista is published that there's more rental property coming up for rent, is that the rental prices, they're softening, but I'll say a smidge. I'm sorry to use that term, but it's just a little bit, because in some cases we've looked at properties throughout downtown Lisbon and the historic center where the prices keep going up. They're not going down. Now, in some neighborhoods and in some areas when you get in the outlying areas, and then in other cities and towns throughout Portugal, you can see, and you go on Idealista or you go through some of the real estate sites, and you'll see a little mark, a down mark or a down delta saying down by 10% or reduced by a certain percentage or a dollar amount. So that's, I think, good news. But the bubble that people are waiting for still hasn't happened here. And I think that that's something that it was published in 2022. Here comes the bubble. Now that the world opens up. And then 2023, here comes the bubble. Well, we're just starting off in 2024. And the market, you could argue, is softening in a little area, but not drastically, and meaning there's no bubble burst. And again, as I'm saying that, there's a lot of overvalued property. I don't think anyone's going to say that Lisbon and Porto property is reasonably matched with what it should be. It's overpriced. It just is. I think every reasonable person could admit that. But we've all been waiting to publish that video. Hey, the bubble burst now, or the dam burst, come on in. The real estate's now gotten back to a reasonable rate. And it hasn't happened yet. So hopefully, not in 2022, not in 2023, maybe in 2024, with some of the changes that have happened over prior years with Golden Visa, it's still too early to determine, like the NHR change, how that will impact housing. One would assume or one would think that less people are going to move, but who knows? But even then, even if less people move, that doesn't necessarily mean that prices are going to come down. The hope is that prices, whether you're renting or buying, will become more reasonable, because I think it's pricing more people out of Portugal. And often this channel is based on mostly Americans, Canadians, British, and some Australian people, so English-speaking countries that are focusing on people looking to move here. But most of the people that we meet from India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka that are here, Senegal, Angola, many of those people come and there may be 2 or 3 families living in one apartment and they're paying a high sum, whereas 10 years ago or 15 years ago in some cases, their older brothers or sisters moved, and it was a far different story where they could move by themselves or move just as a couple and have an apartment where now they have to put families in, multiple families sometimes, just to get by. So I wanted to put this in here. They're not reporting any bubble, and there's different entities in Europe that are saying overpriced, it's ready to burst, but no one's given a date. And we keep looking at every year is going to be the year. Maybe 24 will be. Maybe you'll be able to find a property that you want at a price that you're willing to pay or a rent that you're willing to pay. But so far, much of it's still overpriced. So anyway, this is a video about Portugal property rentals. Wanted to give you some of the latest information. And again, as much as Portugal news, I get frustrated with the lack of reporting. These were decent articles that I thought were worth you knowing about. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch the channel and enjoy your travels.